Hi guys, welcome back to Primrose and Pearl Bath Products. Today we're in the studio making the Dino-Bomb bath bomb from the current Eclectic collection. Here's a photo of it when it's all done so you can see what it's going to turn out like. For this bath bomb I use a 3D printed mold. This one comes in 3 different parts. So there's the flat base, the frame part that goes around, and then what they call the plunger. The trickiest part about this dinosaur mold is just to make sure that you get enough of the bath bomb mix into the tail and the head portions. That way they're not thinner than the rest and crumble and fall apart. The first thing I'm going to do is measure out my cocoa butter and grapeseed oil. Those are the oils that I use for like a binder to start to bring the mix together before I add any of the water. So I pop that into my microwave to get it melted down. And for this bath bomb, I wanted it to be a green color. So I have already bloomed my baking soda and my kaolin clay with a blue and yellow water-soluble dye. When you're using water-soluble dyes for coloring bath bombs, you do need to bloom them. So you take the baking soda, and in my case, I put the kaolin clay in too, with a small amount of water and then the amount of colorant that you want. And you mix it all together and then you let it dry before you actually go and mix your full bath bomb mix. Next, I add some SLSA, also known as sodium lauryl sulfate acetate. I probably butchered that. This is what adds the foam and a little bit of bubble to the bath bomb. Now, I like to use that as my surfactant versus some of the other ingredients you might see. You might see SLS in other surfactants. The SLSA tends to be a little bit more gentle. It's derived from coconut or palm oil. And here I am just mixing it into that baking soda and kaolin clay mix. The SLSA and a lot of those powdered surfactants tend to be really fine, which means they can get up into the air very easily when you're mixing, especially with a hand mixer like I use. And you definitely don't want to breathe that stuff in. I actually wear a mask when I'm mixing all of that stuff together because it's not good to get that into your lungs. To my melted oils, I'm adding some polysorbate 80, which is a solubilizer. This is what helps the colorant actually blend into the bath water and not just kind of cling to the sides of the tub and leave stains everywhere. Then I'm also adding my fragrance oil, which for this bath bomb, I am using a fragrance called Monkey Farts, which has a really funny name, but it smells so good. It's a tropical blend of banana, coconut, a couple other tropical fruits. It's super kid-friendly scent, but I think adults love it too. I mean, I love it, which is probably true of most of the fragrances that I use, that I love them, and otherwise I probably wouldn't use them. My next step here is to add all of those oils into my baking soda, kaolin clay, and SLSA mixture. I like to blend all of that together before I add my citric acid. For me and the way that I do my mixing, I have found that mixing all of my oils into my baking soda and my kaolin clay before I add my citric acid tends to reduce the amount of accidental activation that I get. Meaning when you go to add your binder and it gets overactivated, like there's too much moisture in it and it starts to bubble and doesn't really want to hold together, and then the whole thing becomes a mess. So for me personally, I find when I mix it this way, I have less of that issue down the road. When you mix your bath bomb mix, it's kind of like when you're baking. You want to make sure that you take time to scrape the sides down, make sure you're getting all the way down to the bottom, just to have that really homogeneous blend all together. It makes for a much better end product when you just take that little bit of time to make sure that you're really getting everything blended together. Now that I have all that blended together, my next step is to add the citric acid. The combination of the citric acid to baking soda and water is what makes the bath bomb have its signature fizz and spin and do all that kinds of crazy stuff in the bathtub. So here I'm measuring it out. There are some clumps in my citric acid. I could have run it through a strainer, but on this particular day, I just didn't want to have more dishes to wash. So I go in with a gloved hand and break up any of the bigger clumps that I see before going back in with my hand mixer. And once I am satisfied with getting all the little bumps and lumps out, like I said, I'll go back in with my hand mixer. I'll do the same thing, scrape the sides, make sure that it is all good and blended before I go ahead and add my binder. Now that everything is blended, I will go in with my binder, which essentially means whatever liquid you're using to hold the bath bomb together. Some people use isopropyl alcohol, some people use witch hazel, some people use distilled water or a combination of any of the above. I like to use just plain distilled water. I've tried it with different combinations, and this is always just the one that works best for me. So a couple of spritzes of distilled water will go in there. You see it bubble up just a tiny little bit, and then we're quick to get back in with that hand mixer to make sure that, again, everything is just really well blended before you start to mold everything together. One really important thing to do when you are making bath bomb mix is to test your consistency. You want to make sure that it will hold together well enough to be put into a mold and stay together when it dries, but you don't want it so saturated that it's actually activating before you want it to and continuing to expand even after you put it in the mold. I liken it to kinetic sand. If you have kids and you've ever played with kinetic sand, that's kind of the texture that I go for. Some people say wet sand, but to me that's just not specific enough. The other thing is depending on what kind of mold you're using, whether it's a 3D printed mold or a vacuum mold or just a random, sometimes I use little mini cupcake tins or other random things that I can find. It will change the consistency of your mix, meaning you might need it to be a little more wet or a little more dry to work with the mold that you're using. Here you see I'm measuring my bath bomb mix out into my mold on a scale because I do sell these. I want to make sure that every bath bomb is the same weight, that there's no inconsistency from one bath bomb to the next bath bomb. So we always measure on top of a scale. And again, I'm really working hard to make sure that I get enough mix up into the head area and the tail area so that things don't crumble and break apart and fall apart as soon as I go to unmold it. Once I am satisfied with the amount of mix, and sometimes I'm really, really particular like I'm being right now, once I'm satisfied, I take that top plunger part and I will press down into the mold. That's what compresses all of the bath bomb mix down and helps it to hold together. Now, there's different theories about don't press too hard because then it doesn't float. To me, the bath bomb floating or sinking is always a gamble. Like, to me, there's no perfect science to it. Making bath bombs is like part science and part art and part just pure craftsmanship. And it's always a little different depending on what you're making as far as shape and weight, and if you're adding things, it affects how it's going to perform in the tub. Once I'm ready to unmold it, I take that flat piece off and then I'm kind of pushing and pulling simultaneously on that outside frame part and that inside plunger part. Now, some of the molds are easier than others because this one has such thin parts. Sometimes it can be a little finicky, but here's what it looks like after it is unmolded. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to finish molding out the rest of my bath bomb mix there. Once these have dried for about 24 hours, I will go back in and paint them. And the reason that I wait, you don't necessarily have to, but if I have to move them at all to be able to get a better angle to paint, I just don't want to mess anything up before it's had enough time to dry. I love painting details on bath bombs like this because I think it just really brings it to life. Sometimes it does take time depending on how intricate I'm trying to be, but without it, I think it's just not the same. It doesn't have that magic, you know, that when you unwrap it and you see those super cute, fully painted little dinosaur. Now, I keep saying paint here. What I am using is a mixture of isopropyl alcohol and micas. Micas are either natural or synthetic. It's basically minerals that are colored. And that's why I say it can be either natural or synthetic. You can get naturally mined mica. You can also get synthetic mica, which is made in a lab. They perform the same way as far as coloring goes. And I mix it with the isopropyl alcohol and it turns it into that, you know, kind of paint-like consistency. So I'm going to go through and finish adding the details to all my little dinosaurs here, and I will be back at the end. All right, guys, I am finishing up just the last little details on my dino bombs here. I would love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.